At 2:03 a.m. on the 22nd of October 2025, above Morovia, Russia, 48 Ukrainian drones converged on the Saran's mechanical plant. This factory built the mines choking the Donbass. Then the KRA-4 electronic warfare array roared to life, pouring a 500-watt wall of jamming power across every known GPS band. For any standard drone that relied on satellite navigation, the mission would have ended right there. But these aircraft were not running stock software at all. Ukrainian engineers had loaded custom firmware that, upon detecting a total GPS blackout, immediately switched to alternative logic, essentially the military cousin of Tesla's autopilot in practice. The AQ-400 Scythe drone's Skynote S AI instantly compared live camera feeds against a preloaded satellite map of the terrain, navigating by recognizing roads, tree lines, and riverbeds with resilient visual odometry. You can jam a satellite signal, but you cannot jam planet Earth itself. The entire swarm, all 48 drones, continued unbothered, skimming the landscape at 40 feet to remain beneath the long-range radar curtain throughout. Then at 2:06 a.m., the real fight began. 10 miles out, the Phantom Shift maneuver kicked in. 44 decoy drones screamed upward to 1,000 feet, and the Panzer SMDE operator's screen exploded with contact. He faced an impossible equation. The system could track dozens, but it could engage only 4 targets at once. 5 seconds later, the first volley of 12 TKB-1055 missiles launched, each accelerating to Mach 3.5. 12 lances of light met 12 decoy drones, vaporizing them mid-air. A perfect 100% kill, flawless in execution, exactly as Ukraine intended by design. The Panzer's critical weakness is not accuracy, it is the limited magazine of ready-to-fire missiles on board. It carries 12, and after that it relies on a support vehicle for a frantic mechanical reload that costs precious seconds. Ukraine was not attacking the Panzer's radar or its missiles, they were attacking its endurance. At 2:06 and 27 seconds after a rushed reload assist, a second volley of 12 tore skyward. Another 12 decoys turned into falling debris. The Panzer had now fired 24 missiles and destroyed 24 targets. The problem was, its total combat load was 48 missiles, and it had just used half to obliterate about $720,000 worth of plywood and cheap electronics that meant nothing. The display then flashed the message Ukraine counted on. Ammunition depleted, reload cycle initiated now. It was a fatal 60-second pause. During that window, the remaining 24 drones, 20 decoys, and 4 real attackers, still shadowing the supply truck, closed the distance to just 5 miles from the perimeter. The Panzer was out of the fight entirely. Think that truck was coincidence? Not at all. Planning for this moment had begun many weeks beforehand. Ukraine's HER intelligence had not only monitored the plant, they had studied its pulse carefully. Through signals intelligence, they mapped Rosgvardia's radio networks, learned call signs, and, most importantly, determined the routine 2 a.m. shift change and exactly which supply truck would arrive each night without fail. This backbone supported the entire operation, though few would recognize it in the moment now actively unfolding. As the truck approached the main gate, the stage was set and waiting. At 2:08 a.m., the swarm hit the facility's third defensive layer, a physical barrier of steel netting and electronic sensors. This was a sophisticated anti-drone system. Here is how it is meant to work. The steel netting is like a giant volleyball net designed to do one of two things. It either snags a propeller, forcing the lightweight drone to crash, or triggers the warhead's fuse early. A blast 30 feet away is a nuisance at worst, and that design guarantees it. Working alongside the net are automated infrared sensors. They don't film anything, they detect heat signatures only. A drone's electric motor and battery create a faint but distinct hotspot moving against the cool night background. When one of these sensors detects that shifting heat, it screams an alert. This is considered Russia's divine eye for hunting intruders. But Ukrainian intelligence studied satellite and thermal imagery for weeks, discovering a blend of predictable weak points. The net had a predictable flaw, a gap near the vehicle gate, acting less like a hole and more like a funnel, yet the real vulnerability was the sensors. They were cheap commercial-grade units with a notorious Achilles heel: fog. Dense morning fog blinded them, scattering a drone's tiny heat signature like a whisper lost in a storm. This was not luck, it was calculated, waiting for the right weather window. That moment had arrived. The remaining 20 decoy drones now made their final sacrifice. Their mission wasn't survival. It was creating the exact crisis Russian guards were trained to expect, drawing eyes and rifles upward where nothing real threatened them. At 29 hours, the decoys broke formation and charged toward Rosvardia guard posts from multiple angles. The perimeter erupted in chaos. 60 guards opened fire wildly. Machine gun tracers stitched the sky, and a Verba shoulder-launched missile screamed into the fog, hunting heat and finding nothing but confusion above. Machine gun tracers stitched the night sky, and for the next 60 seconds, every Russian defender along that line kept looking up, utterly fixated on the aerial swarm they believed to be the main assault. For the next minute, the defenders searched the sky, and into that confusion, the mission commander in Kyiv executed his single most critical manual action. He keyed a microphone patched into captured Rosgvardia frequencies and broadcast a calm, scripted message in flawless Russian new shifts stuck at the gate. He said, "Traffic's a mess. Open up. We're on a tight schedule." The guard, overloaded by alarms and the sound of gunfire mixed with the sight of drones, heard a routine, slightly annoyed radio call and made the fatal human error. As the steel gate slid open, 4 real AQ-400 drones, masked by the truck's radar and thermal signature, slipped through the gap. They were ghosts inside the machine. At 2:10 a.m., the Quick Reaction Force screamed onto the scene. 3 Tiger armored vehicles and a Zu-23 cannon mounted on a heavy truck roared in, but they were 30 seconds too late. The Zu-23's gunner spun his turret and struggled to acquire targets. The system, designed for helicopters, needed about 10 seconds to slew and lock. The 4 Phantom drones were already inside the perimeter. Using thermal imaging, they locked on to the main munitions warehouse. Their terminal guidance took mere milliseconds as the gunner frantically tried to engage with a torrent of 23mm tracers. The drones did not fly a predictable path. In their terminal dive, they accelerated and corrected trajectory in milliseconds based on the warehouse's thermal signature. The gunner tracked the 4th drone for a fraction of a second. His targeting computer screamed for a lock. He fired. Shells walked across the night sky, stitching a line just behind the drone's tail, a near miss. Russia's worst nightmare began. At 2:11 a.m., the first Scythe drone, its AI locking the largest thermal signature, slammed into the northwestern corner of Building 7, the final assembly and main storage hall. This warehouse was the facility's crown jewel, holding tens of thousands of assembled mines ready for shipment. Its 25-pound warhead was not meant for a simple blast. It acted like a high-speed surgical tool, its hardened nose puncturing the corrugated steel before the main charge detonated inside. The initial blast didn't just destroy the mines it hit. It unleashed a supersonic overpressure wave, a wall of force that hammered the steel casings of thousands of adjacent TM-89 mines. At the same time, intense heat superheated their explosive filler past critical thresholds. The result was not a slow chain reaction, but a near-instantaneous sympathetic detonation. The entire northern half of the warehouse erupted in one seamless blast. 3 seconds later, a second drone struck Building 4, the fuse and igniter assembly line. The target there wasn't a show of fireworks, but industrial decapitation. Volatile chemical precursors ignited, turning a precision mechanics shop into a chemical inferno and rendering that production line offline for years. Then the 3rd and 4th drones fed the blaze, striking the already burning southern section of Building 7. These strikes were designed to feed the inferno and create a self-sustaining firestorm, ripping the structure open and allowing massive influxes of oxygen that turned the blaze into a convective engine no fire brigade on Earth could approach. Maybe the fires in Saransk will eventually burn out. But the strategic fallout from this single operation was a 4-layer catastrophe for Moscow, a domino that would reshape the battlefield for the coming year. The immediate military impact was undeniable. This was not merely lost inventory. 70% of the facility, including assembly lines and primary storage halls holding an estimated 150,000 ready-to-ship mines, was vaporized or rendered structurally unsound. In corporate terms, it was a $100 million capital write-off. Russia hadn't simply lost a shipment, it lost the factory itself. The means of production for one of its most effective defensive weapons was, for all intents and purposes, depleted. But hardware was only the start. The Saransk plant sat at the heart of a just-in-time supply system, the Amazon Prime for the Donbass front. That artery was severed. For at least 6 months, Russia would reroute its mine supply through secondary, less efficient facilities far in Siberia, adding weeks to delivery times and roughly $2 million per month in premium shipping costs. Russian commanders could no longer carpet the front with mines the way they once had. They would have to ration them. For the first time, commanders would be forced into hard choices about which sectors merited defense, creating exploitable gaps Ukraine could target. That logistical chaos bled straight into a third layer: psychological collapse. The Kremlin issued its predictable thin statement about a technical incident caused by careless smoking, but the unredacted truth was already spreading on Telegram. For citizens in Mordovia who had been told the war was distant, the illusion of safety collapsed with a mushroom cloud in their backyard. The real target of that psychological blow wasn't civilians alone, it was the Russian soldier in the trench. He had been told his homeland was an impenetrable fortress. Now he watched a video of its heartland burning. The unspoken contract was broken. Morale, already fragile, took a direct hit. That led to a fourth, devastating effect: a forced shift in Russian military doctrine. For 2 years, Moscow had prioritized a dense umbrella of air defenses protecting field armies. The Saransk strike proved that doctrine obsolete. The rear had become the front. Moscow faced an impossible choice: protect troops or protect the war machine that supplied them. They chose the war machine, pulling an estimated 50 Panzer systems from frontline duty to guard critical infrastructure hundreds of miles back. In doing so, they created a 100-meter-wide gap in their battlefield air defense, a formal invitation for Ukrainian strike aircraft and long-range missiles. So, what was the final return on investment? Ukraine spent roughly $1.4 million on 48 drones. In return, they inflicted $100 million in direct damage, crippled a critical supply line for at least 6 months, shattered Kremlin propaganda, and forced their enemy to thin its frontline defenses. That's roughly a 7,000% return. And this was not the only attack that day. 500 meters southeast in Makhachkala, Dagestan, another precision strike hit executed by 2 long-range Lutai attack drones. They flew low and fast, then one climbed a high altitude and cruised at 30,000 feet over the Caspian Sea. They used a flight path that kept them below radar horizon for most of the journey, effectively invisible until the final minutes. Their target was not the whole plant, but a single 200-foot catalytic cracking tower, the irreplaceable piece that turns crude into high-grade naval fuel. Armed with a specialized thermobaric warhead, the first Lutai didn't just punch a hole, it turned the entire tower into a massive fuel-air bomb, rupturing nearby storage tanks and igniting a catastrophic inferno. Now look at the board. This was not 2 isolated strikes. It was a single, brilliantly coordinated strategic operation, a classic 1-2 punch designed to degrade 2 different aspects of the Russian war machine simultaneously. Saransk was the body blow, attacking Russia's future capacity to produce mines and making future Ukrainian offensives easier and safer. Makhachkala was the knockout, hitting present capability and degrading the fleet's operational readiness now. One strike suffocated supply. The other suffocated the trigger puller. The operation forced a complete strategic recalculation for Moscow. The Kremlin's defense posture rested on the myth of an impenetrable bubble created by prized 400 seconds and Panzer systems. That myth was pierced on the night of October 22nd. Ukraine proved the bubble didn't exist. But here's the million-dollar question. If you were the commander that night, how many decoys would you sacrifice to force a Panzer to fire all its ready missiles? 24 like Ukraine. Only 12 to save some, or all 48 to be sure? Comment your number and reasoning.